So I was one of the don't know what you can call it, developers at FEDSA. Uh, I wanted to start sort of a mentoring session once a week because I know that the value that it can bring to people as they're learning. But then Schalk said to me, "Look, why don't we actually sort of just join together and we start doing this through FEDSA, which is Front End Development South Africa. It's a non-profit organization that they've got going. So definitely be on the lookout for anything that they've often got events and things, stuff that's really will help you learn. Cool.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, so I'm just going to give it a few minutes. I don't know who's going to be coming through this evening. Last week there were quite a few people, but I spoke to a lot of people beforehand, and I know they were going to be joining. But this week I didn't really speak to many people, so I didn't like promote it basically. So the turnout might be a bit low, but it's fine as long as we can record it, so that others can watch it at a later stage. And then we'll just give it just like about 5 minutes, and then just suss who is here, and then we can decide on sort of what we want to cover for today. Cool. Hey Jack, how's it going?
How's it, man? I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good. How's it been going?
Yeah, everything's good, just having fun with it. Messing around with quite a lot of things, but yeah, it's good so far.
Cool.
And you? How's your side?
Oh, no, just tired from work, but otherwise good.
Yeah, sick, man.
So just out of you three, is there anything that you want to be seeing this evening?
I'm just kind of here to listen, to be honest. I
Okay.
just thought maybe you had a plan, but yeah, I'm easy.
Look, I do have a backup plan, but
Yeah.
we did speak about it, and Schalk mentioned that at some point I'm gonna end up running out of plans. So we sort of want to try and see if we can get sort of the public to guide us in what they want us to cover for the evening. But failing which, I do sort of have a backup plan, which will be something I have covered previously, where it's just sort of basic, sporting out a basic page, and then just showing you around VS Code, sort of some stuff you would learn at work, but rather you can learn it now to sort of, I don't know, get sort of almost like fake work experience per se.
Yeah. Sounds good.
And Teresa, is there anything particular that you're struggling with or you would like me to cover?
So I think what I was just asked last week, I'm busy with Flexbox and Grid, and sometimes, well, I'm just starting with Grid, but Flexbox sometimes get a bit confusing
Okay.
when you use it with all the classes, when you do it more intricate stuff. But then also the div or the semantics, the naming of stuff is also sometimes confusing. It's the two things I struggle with.
Yeah. Okay, so I think I'm gonna get started. Okay, let me start screen sharing. Good evening, Tamira.
Hello.
How are you?
Sorry I'm late.
No,
I'm
it's okay.
fine. How's everyone?
Good. Tamira, I was just asking the rest. Is there anything particular that you want covered for this evening?
Nope. Happy to listen in.
Okay. Right. So I think if everyone's fine with it, I'm just gonna basically just kick it off as like a complete 101, start from the beginning. If you did join me probably last week or the week before, this might be sort of just going over some of the same stuff. It's never bad to revise. You can never revise too many times. So it might be just a little bit boring, but it's going to allow us to at least get sort of kind of a starting point, and then we can go from there. Like, I don't want to go the next step and then people that weren't there, they're missing out. So if that's fine with everyone, we're just going to sort of start right from the beginning.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. Right, so just at the moment, what I've got open here is Photoshop. You don't need Photoshop. Actually, in today's, the way that UI works today, you just actually don't even have to buy Photoshop at all. You can do your UI and UX stuff in Figma, which is also free. But I've got this open just so that we can talk about the way that CSS works. So when it comes to CSS, a lot of people don't realize that it's sort of taken from the way that art applications work on computers in general. So if you have got some experience with Photoshop or any of these programs, even like, what is it, Fireworks from back in the day, or Dreamweaver, you will know that you've got layers that you can pile on top of each other. So for example, I'm going to go and I'm actually going to draw sort of like a square here, and I can go and have another layer and I can draw another square. And so these are two separate layers, right? Okay, so the way that HTML works with CSS is actually very, very similar. Yeah, we got Schalk. Good evening, Schalk. I think you muted.
Whoops. How are you guys doing?
Good.
It's quite crowded in here.
So I'm just going to sort of cover sort of like something that I sort of had pre-planned in a way, because I don't really have any direction yet. Okay. So I was just telling them that basically when it comes to CSS, it's good to think of it almost as layers in Photoshop, because it generally works the same way that you'll have like a div, but instead of a div like in Photoshop, you're going to have your layers. So before I get to styling, let's just talk about the way that divs position themselves. So if you can imagine that you're just going to have this entire page as your body, when you drop a div in, it's going to automatically be a block. And what that means is it's just going to sort of span your page like this. What you can also do is you can also sort of set an inline block. And typically what a block is means that they can't sit on top of each other. So it will be over here and then the one will sit next to it. It's not going to sit right on top. So you can have your usual block, which is like this, your normal div container. It usually has this attribute set to it to be a block like this. And you can also, like I mentioned now, you can actually also make it inline. Now, where the real magic comes with CSS is to try and think of it as an art application when you've got layers like this you can lay on top of each other. Because when you've got CSS, you get the property or attribute, which is position. Sorry, let me just make that smaller. Where's the color? Okay, but anyway, so you get position, and typically you would have a relative position, which means that they're actually going to be sitting right next to each other like this. But what you can also do is you can set it to absolute. And what that does is it means that these layers can now sit on top of each other like this. And now that's where your magic is really going to come into CSS, and so that you can actually start designing some amazing things. I'm just going to pull up a quick page here that I made like a really long time ago. That I just like to use to demonstrate the powers that you get with CSS if you try and think of it as an art application. So if we just take a look at this design here, at the background, is actually just one sort of, it's just a piece of leather that is this horrible yellow looking color. I'll try and find it in a moment. I know I've got a lot of layers here. But then if we just look at the corner here, you can see that there is this sort of endpoint in the menu. Sorry, I'm trying to grab one here quickly. I'm going to have to go into the CSS. These are the dev tools, which I'll also cover in a moment. Okay, so there you can see there's like these overlays, the corner overlays here, which is basically, it's just a div with an image in it. And then by using position absolute, you can now actually position it to wherever you want. Something to take into account is that when you set something to position absolute, it's going to position itself relative to the parent container that it's in. So let's, for example, say this was a div inside of this, and there was only the sort of the main div, like the body of the page. When you went to position absolute, it would then now be positioned according to this container inside here. If you had another container inside it like this, if you were to set this middle one to be positioned relative, then this one is then going to treat it as its parents to bound itself by. Right. Okay, so let me just jump back to VS Code. Are there any questions from anyone so far?
No, it's all good, man.
No, just wondering why it's called position absolute when it's position relative.
Okay, so the reason why it's called that is when, for example, let me just actually So I actually had a better file open for this, but it's on my laptop. So imagine this gray one is the body of the page, and then we've got this as a div container. When I was gonna set, if I set this, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this. It's basically, it's going to be relative to the parent that it's in.
Yeah. So I mean, like the name absolute is just odd for me when in my mind I think relative. But yeah, not a.
I think it's basically taking, it's basically saying that when it's an absolute, it's basically the absolute positioning to the entire parent container. It's a bit confusing when you say, like, I can't just say it's parent container because it depends on which container has actually got relative set. So I could actually have a container within a container within a container, and its absolute positioning is only going to be absolute to, well, it's going to be relative to the actual parent container that's got relative set. I know that's now sounding really confusing. So I'd rather use that as an example in a moment. So let me carry on with the session for now, and we'll go back into the container. So that's why I just wanted to start, just to sort of get sort of some brief look at just basic divs, and I'll build on that in a moment. Schalk, is there anything you want to add at this stage?
Yeah, so I always get an interesting question when I kind of introduce this to students, and that is like, why don't we just position absolute everything? Like, why even make use of the actual document flow and use kind of the box model and inline block and all of those things? Why don't we just move? So use the example of kind of Photoshop and the layers. Why don't we just like to build entire websites in that manner?
So why would we only use absolute positioning?
No, why don't we just use position absolute for everything? Like, why even have any other way? So obviously the default is position static. So why even have that? Why not have the default be absolute?
Well, if it was to be absolute, what you'd end up having is that every single container would be sitting stacked on top of each other like this. The reason why we've got them as sort of the way that it is default is so that they can be arranged next to each other like this automatically. So that when you're displaying content, let's say that this is sort of let me just give it sort of an outline here. So naturally, when you're putting something next to it, it's going to sit next to it and not top of each other. Usually, you're not actually going to be using position absolute a lot. That's absolute positioning is typically only for styling stuff in a unique way. So, for example, say I wanted this in the top right corner, sort of sitting up like that. Then I can position it absolute and sort of use values to position it where I want. But if we had it as a default where we've got just absolute positioning from the get-go, everything's just going to be overlaid on top of each other like this. The way to sort of think about this is not generally like in CSS. You actually want to look at sort of the way where it really first comes from, the reasons why they chose CSS to make these decisions. And before you joined, I said that CSS, a lot of it is taken from the way that we work with R programs. But if we were to just say use everything in absolute positioning, that means that if I type Word documentation or if I'd write in Microsoft Word, every single time I'd write, this text would appear on top of the text every single time. But what Microsoft Word is doing is it's also basically doing sort of position relative. So let's just go and just grab a picture and stick it in. There you can see that the text is actually sitting next to it. So for us to have like a good flow, we need the stuff to have relative positioning to each other. I'm not too sure if that asks your question. I feel like you're going to have a really good technical answer to that.
No, that's kind of what I was leaning towards, because I often find that when someone's just starting out, they abuse position absolute to the extreme, because I don't know how to make it position it at this place, or I don't know how to put it above this thing. Okay, let's just use position absolute. But as you rightfully explained, like, the problem there is you are effectively telling the browser that, hey, don't try and figure out where this is going to go. Trust me, I'm going to manually put it somewhere. But the problem with that is if you add other content, now you need to manually go and move things around again every time you add something new. And that's also kind of a limitation of something like Photoshop. If you want to add an extra section, now you need to pull everything down. which is a lot easier to do in a GUI than like actually entering the X and Y coordinates.
Yeah. Okay. And listen, it's been a really long day, so I have to apologize if I'm not on top of my game today. So please just bear with me. Usually I'm a lot sharper, but it's just been a really long Monday. Okay, so I'm
I think he just bombed out.
Oh, bro,
he was mid apology.
it's Afrios, man. Like,
sorry, you broke up.
Yeah. Man, I pay so much for my fiber connection. I don't know why I always have problems. Okay, so now I was just saying, I apologize if I'm not on top of my game today. It's just been a really long day. And your brain only has sort of 7-8 hours of proper concentration. Okay, so let's expand on this. Like, I actually had a really I think well planned out, but my brain's just not cooperating with me today. So let's have a look at this Google page quickly and see why I was talking about the CSS layers and all of that. Okay, so here's your basic Google page as it loads. So what I typically do, and I think many people do, is break it down in their mind. And this is a really good way to sort of try and demonstrate how you should try and approach your designs and all of that. Thinking of it sort of the way that you would like with Photoshop. So let's say I'm immediately given this page like this. What I'm going to immediately break it down in my mind, I'm going to say to myself, okay, I know I'm going to have this outer container over here, and this is going to be like your page wrapper. There's different schools of thoughts as whether you have a wrapper or a container. Like, I like to use a wrapper and a container. Some people think you should only use something called a wrapper or something called a container. What I'm talking about now is just an opinionated way to name your classes. Okay, so just imagine there's this sort of outside wrapper or container, and that's going to contain our entire page, right? Now, inside here, what we're going to be doing is we're going to need a header here. You can see we've got the Gmail and we've got this icon up here. So what's probably going to be over here is we're actually going to have a header up here. And then at the bottom of our page, we can see we're going to have a footer over here. Then in the middle of our page, we'll have our main content, right? So often when it comes to design, I'm not joking with you. If you learn to look at CSS in the way that you look at Photoshop layers or like Figma layers, any art program layers, these things sort of like naturally sort of unfurling to this kind of sorry, let me just mute that quickly. You can eventually start breaking your pages out into these separate layers like that. And with CSS classes, it's very similar to the way that you can break it up like this. So you can immediately see now we've actually got a page ready to go. What I've got here, each individual layer, this will translate directly to a div that you need. So we would have our page wrapper on the outside. We'll have a header, which will be like it's actually the header. It'll be a div, but we want to use the header semantic tag. And then you'd have a footer here, and we would then either div or the footer semantic tag. So any questions yet? Otherwise, I'm going to jump to VS Code.
You can continue.
Okay. Right. So we're going to use this design. What I'm going to do is put this on another screen. Generally, when you're developing, it's great to have a solid workflow. You need a solid workflow, otherwise you get bogged down. And something that's always highly recommended is try and have more than one monitor so that you can, I'm not saying go and spend money, but if you've got another monitor, go hook it up so that you can have your code in one spot and you can have something also on another, like your page that you're developing will be on another spot here. And then, like, for example, I've got 4 monitors. On my other monitor, I will have my documentation that I'm busy looking up at the time. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I'm in VS Code. I think I should start from scratch with VS Code here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a folder. I'm actually going to just start from scratch opening it up. So I'm going to just go to the folder that I'm typically working in. I'm working in a virtual machine here, even though my main computer is Windows 10. But Windows doesn't play well with Node.js. The packages in Node.js, they're actually bought for like Linux operating systems. So there's a bit of a problem when it comes to trying to work in just a baseline Windows 10 system or just a Windows system. So sorry, just bear with me. Okay, so when you open VS Code, you want to be opening a folder. For example, like you go File, Open Folder. And the reason why is because it gets smart. It sort of keeps information about the folder that you're actually working in. So if I had a whole bunch of windows open here and I closed this, and then I reopened that folder, it's going to remember everything about that folder I was working in. So usually you want to open a folder, not like trying to open files. Okay, so let's get started here. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to create an index.html file. And the way that it works when the internet works is whenever you go to a page, it's always going to look for an index.html file. So if I was to type my demo website.com, what it's actually going to look for on the web server is it's always going to look for an index.html file. So that's why we're actually calling our files index.html. So if I type this path in here with no index.html, it's going to find the index.html, even if it doesn't actually go and say that. Oh, can you believe someone bought that? Okay, so this is VS Code, the most sort of popular editor that people are using at the moment, and it's also free, which is amazing. One of the extensions you're going to want when you start learning is an extension called Live Server. So let's just get to that, and I'll just type it in here, Live Server. You're gonna need this to basically build your pages out, because when you double click a file, for example, if I double click this HTML file and it opens it up here, it's not actually being served. Sorry, I didn't actually open it up in a browser. But if you were to open this file just as it is in a browser, it's not going to get served 100%. So let's just go and just drag this in. I don't know if I can do this in here. No, okay, there we go. So it's actually loaded it as a file. It's not actually loaded correctly as an HTML. So you're going to have a lot of things that it might look like it's working, but a lot of things won't actually work properly. So generally what you want to be doing is you want to be serving the file, and that is what Live Server will do for us. So you would go and get this extension, really simple. You just click install, and once it's on your computer, you will see that it will go and show. There will be, where is it? Why am I not seeing it? There's usually a thing here that says,
I think you need to restart VS Code for it to show up.
it's odd. Okay, let's reopen it. Oh, it's fine. I can still do it from here. So usually there's a button here that will say, oh, there it is. Okay, go live. You should be, hopefully you can see that. So you click go live and it will go and serve it for you. I think it's just getting hidden away. The alternative, which I prefer, is right clicking on the HTML file and then clicking open with Live Server. And then what that's going to do is it's going to go and serve this HTML file on a little local server on your computer. One of the cool things about that, which I discovered, is it's also actually serving that on your local network. And that's really cool if you're trying to go and build things with mobile design. Let me just find, where's my other screen gone to here? There it is. So you could actually open up this address on your phone if it's on your local network, and it will actually show this page. And then one of the other cool things about it is that when you save, it's automatically going to refresh. So you can have your phone sitting in front of you, type some code in, and you save it here. It's automatically going to refresh on your desktop, and it's going to refresh on your phone. And like I mentioned earlier, and I know this especially because I studied music, and there they teach it to you like in depth, is that having a good workflow is it's tantamount to building an amazing product. Like if you don't have a good workflow, you could actually basically prevent yourself from ever developing the most amazing thing you ever could make. So workflow is always important. Okay, so let's get started with this page. I'm going to cheat now. I'm going to show you something which is called an emit. And basically what it is, it's like a little sort of shortcut command that you type, and it's going to replace that little shortcut with a pre-built snippet that's already been written for you. And you can even write your own ones if you'd like. So one of the coolest ones is you just put an exclamation mark, and there you can see it's going to show, it's showing you all this code over here. And if I push tab or click this, it's going to insert all of this code into this document. You might not see this. You'll see there's a little arrow on the right here. You just need to click that little arrow. Let me just get that open again. You just got to click this arrow. I think by default, it doesn't actually show it. You click that arrow, and now it's actually going to show it. You should always actually have this arrow open, because later on, you'll see for functions and that, you'll get really, really important information. Okay, so I'm going to push tab, and bam, that's got and filled our entire file with a baseline HTML file. There's a lot of stuff to remember. Like, I don't think you should ever really be concerned about having to be able to write this from memory. Like, you should possibly understand what the character set is and what this viewport is doing. At some point, you should learn about these things. But knowing this off by heart is not important. There's too many HTML tags and CSS properties and different things you can be doing in HTML and CSS to remember them by heart. What's important is knowing how to use them and how they work, or when to implement them. But you don't need to know how all of these things off by your heart. you'll find that even the most experienced and seasoned developers, they're still going and Googling to find answers in that. So if you're like wondering, oh, how am I supposed to know all these HTML tags? You're not supposed to remember all of them. Eventually, you will know a large number of them, but it's not knowing them off by heart. It's knowing how to implement them. Okay, so I'm going to save this. Doesn't seem like anything's going to be happening here, but it's actually, this is now an HTML page. And this doc type at the beginning here is telling this browser that this page that you've opened, this document you've opened, is actually an HTML file, so interpret it as HTML. Okay, so I'm just going to open the dev tools. So let's just quickly jump into the dev tools here so that we're covering all our grounds. Each of the browsers, including Safari, surprisingly, they've all got their own dev tools. So typically you would access this with Control-Shift-R, or if you're lazy like me, you right-click and you just inspect. And that will open your dev tools over here. You can move this window around. You could even actually pop this window out so that it's actually a separate window. What I'm going to do is, because we're limited by space, I'm going to go and choose to dock. Wait, let me just zoom in for everyone. Okay, so I'm going to click on the More button, and I'm going to dock it to the bottom, so that now we've actually got our dev tools at the bottom here. Now, what the dev tools allows you to do is you can actually go and look at all the different elements, and then when you click an element, it also shows you the styling that's to do with that element. And you could actually also go and just manually write things in here. So I'm just going to write background, and then I know that pink is FF0FF, and there we go. So now we've got a pink background for our body. This is not getting saved into your HTML file though. This is only for this page right now as we're looking. So if I refresh this page, it's gone. Poof, gone. Because it's basically just only for this instance of the page. It's basically like I'm debugging the page almost. Okay, so in the other tabs that you've got in your dev tools, you've got your HTML tags and your CSS. Then you've got your console, which is important for JavaScript. You can actually write your JavaScript in here. So let's just say 5 + 1. That's actually told me that it's 6. So you'll be pretty much having this window open all the time. Like it's what I previously told people when I was at a different course, is you should always have this open. There's almost never a reason to not have this open. Okay. Then you got some other tabs here. I'm not going to really cover these, but like network will show you what is actually being loaded. You'll be able to see if maybe there's a 404, maybe your pictures didn't load. Sorry, there's Google Meets things in the way. It'll show you that maybe an image didn't load or something of the sort. You'll see there's some other things here that maybe shouldn't be there. That's just because we've got this live server and it needs that to serve the pages. You got performance, memory, and application. And then lastly, there's Lighthouse. And with this, what you can do is it will check your page for like accessibility, and if maybe there's it's not up to standards. Like we've got certain web standards that we need to try and be following. So it will see how fast your page loads and see, are you following the accessibility standards, which is a very important thing to be covering, but we'll leave that for another session. Okay, so let's now go back to VS Code. Got our basic page going there. And what we want to be doing is boarding out this Google page. So just give me a second. I'm just going to go and actually just copy this over. Any of you have any questions so far? Guess it's a no. So I just want to just copy this file that I've got so that I can actually... it's gone. Okay, never mind. We're going to forget about that. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually mimic what I did over here to show you that basically we can go and break our layers out like in an art program, and that will actually get translated straight to CSS. Okay, so we had this main page wrapper on the outside, which was this main outside rectangle, and then we're going to have the 3 divs inside, which is the header, then the body, and then the footer. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a CSS file. So let's just call it... Okay, here's the typical convention that people would use when they're sort of just doing sort of a bare bones HTML, JavaScript, CSS project. So they usually have an assets folder like this. I've got an extension called material icon. So you will see that my icons might look a little bit different to yours. I highly recommend it because it actually uses the real icons, and it's, I don't really love that extension. I'll just quickly go there just so you can see what I'm talking about here. material icons. Okay, so it's a material icon theme. You install it, and it'll just ask, do you want to use this icon theme? You just say yes. And then you will see, yeah, this HTML5 icon because it's an HTML5 file. Okay, so with assets inside here, you're going to probably have your styles, and then you'd also have your JavaScript files, so scripts, and then you might have something like your images. Now, this isn't a way that you have to work with it. This is just a common way that people use it. Like a lot of things in programming and web development, you'll hear that people say the word opinionated. And what that means is that it's just, I like doing it this way, so this is my way of doing it. You don't have to do it that way. It's just their way of doing it. Usually you do want to follow standards, but just because people are doing something a particular way doesn't always mean you have to be doing it that way. Okay, so what I'm going to want now is I'm going to want like a style file. So I'll just call this style.css. And now we need to go and import this file. So one of the cool things with VS Code is you can split this so that I don't have to keep jumping between my files like this. This is going to kill your workflow. So go here, split it down, and you've now got your styling at the bottom and you've got your HTML file sitting at the top here. Okay, so we're going to go and import this. Now, in an HTML document, you've got two parts to it. You've got the head, and then you've got the body. The body is basically just where all of your content's going to go. This is what you're actually seeing on the page. You're seeing, like, if I put something in here, it's going to appear here. Now, what the head is, this is meta information. It's like if you actually downloaded an MP3 file, then that MP3 file is going to have like metadata, like who that author is, maybe a link to their Spotify page or whatever, and all this different kind of meta information about that file. Now with HTML, we put that in the head. So this is now basically meta information about this file that doesn't actually get shown to the user. It's setting some properties for that HTML file. Okay, so in our head, we also import any external files that we're going to be using. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to go and import a CSS file. Now, there's a great possibility I'm going to get this wrong just because I don't often have to do this. And it'll basically show you that we often have to just go and Google things if we haven't been using it for a long time. But I think what we do is we go relationship style sheet. And
there's actually an emit for it.
Oh.
So you can actually just type link.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
And
there
then,
it is.
Yep.
Okay. I actually like doing it because then I get to embarrass myself, and they understand that look, you can't always know everything. You know, if you don't use it long enough, you're gonna forget it. But like a lot of people, they think, there's all the CS stuff, and they freak out because they think with HTML there's all this stuff and all the CSS stuff. I won't remember that now. How am I supposed to even know JavaScript? Like I give up, you know. And it's like I like to just reinforce to people that you're not supposed to know all of this stuff. Like you're gonna forget these things, and it's fine. You just Google it the next day. And that's how you get the answer. What you will need to know is that what is this doing? That's what's important. You need to know what is this actually going to be doing. And basically what this is it's just linking a file, and the type of file we want to be linking is a style sheet, and then href, which is I can't remember what this is for, but I think it's just a reference to the file. And just go / assets styles and style.css. When you're learning, you probably saw me pushing tab as I was doing completion there. So it's like auto completion. Usually when you're actually trying to import files, try and make sure that you're using this feature that they've got where they're showing you this auto completion. That way you're not going to have you're not going to be making typos or anything. Like very often I've seen people, they maybe put A with a capital S. Capital A. Now, capital A is not the same thing as a small a. It's not the same thing. Those are two different character codes. So they're two different directories, basically. A hypertext reference. Thanks, man. Okay, so assets, styles, style.css. Okay, so we saved that. Hey, people. Right, so just to make sure that it's working, I'm going to go to the body. Now, this file is this CSS is now being applied to our HTML file. And I'm just going to go and just put a background. Once again, ff0, that's my key value there. And then we can see it's actually being added. Now, before I just carry on, I actually skipped a step, and I wanted to actually just explain this first. We're linking CSS like this, but you don't have to. This is the preferred way of doing it. But I just wanted to just show you that you can actually go and do your CSS inside your HTML like this. So let's just body background. Let's just go pink. And you'll see that it's actually pink. And you could do the exact same thing with JavaScript. You can actually, sorry, I made a typo there. And it's going to work. There's a typo there, but it will work. Save it. And let's look at the console. There you can see it says hello. So you can see that you can actually write your styling inside your HTML file, and you can actually go and put your script inside your HTML file. So you don't need to be using the style sheet like this. I mean, this is probably, if I remember correctly, this is the way that we actually used to write HTML back 20 years ago. But what we want to be doing is we want to be separating our stuff. There's a common way of looking at HTML and CSS and JavaScript, and that's basically the body, like the human body, where you've got the HTML is the skeleton of your body. So it's like your actual skeleton. It's like the structure of your body. Then you've got your styling, which is the CSS, like we've put this in. So this is like the skin that's gone over the body and the appearance of how you look. And then lastly, you got your JavaScript, which is the functionality. So your arm can pick up your cup of coffee, speaking of. Your arm can, you can get all of that functionality added with your JavaScript. But these things are kind of different, you know. HTML is the sort of the structure, CSS is how it looks, and then JavaScript is the way that these things function. We want to separate it, which is basically the term separation of concerns. And you'll eventually be hearing that. I think that's the right term for this case. So what we do then is instead we actually have separated our CSS into a CSS file, and we do the exact same thing with JavaScript. So we don't have to do this. And then in our HTML, we're just writing HTML. So it's a lot cleaner. So let's just say I get someone in to work on a CSS file. They only need to work on a CSS file. They don't have to go and work on an HTML file. Okay, so sorry, I should have actually covered that first. But okay, and then let's just go back to this before I uncommented. Let's make it bigger. In programming, in pretty much every single language under the sun, you can comment, which is like that. In CSS, it looks with a /star. Let's just say, hello, I'm a comment. And what a comment is code that doesn't get run. It doesn't get interpreted by your browser. It doesn't, like in JavaScript, it doesn't actually get built or compiled or run or anything of the sort. This is for us humans, to go and basically write information about the code we are making. So, for example, in HTML, I could go and say, let's just say it was like heading section. Sorry. And what I'm doing is I'm doing the shortcut Control-Shift-A. I think that is the default shortcut. And what it does is it automatically puts a block comment. So this is now for someone else. When they're opening the file, they can know, okay, this is where the heading section starts. But this is not going to get built out into the HTML file. You can see there's nothing here. Okay, even though it was actually, let me put it in the body, just better example. Okay, so you can see this is not actually written in the page. I'll actually write heading underneath it and save it. Now this part is actually appearing, but this isn't. So comments are there for us to tell other programmers about what's going on in the code. Because I'll tell you what, being the best programmer under the sun isn't about like being some amazing guy that can code all of NASA's stuff in 5 days. The most important factor about being sort of the greatest programmer you can be is writing code that is manageable by not only you, but by other programmers. That's what's important. So that they can come along and join you and contribute to your code without sort of pulling their hair out and spending 5 hours trying to understand what you've written. And not just that, you yourself, 5 months from now, is going to come back and they also going to be like some foreign person that's also got to your code. I can promise you now that you'll come back to your code and a year later and you're going to be like, who wrote this stuff? This is not me. I never wrote this code. So it's very important that we actually put in comments in and meaningful comments. Don't write something basic like, over here you would say hello or pink background, you know, because it's already implied that the background's going to be pink. So you wouldn't go and write something that's very obvious. You'd write something that's going to be a bit more, it explains something that the code doesn't. Okay, so let's, anything, I heard someone.
Yeah, so that was me. So the one thing I learned with comments is don't explain what the code is doing, explain why it's happening.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's, I think, from Uncle Bob in the book Clean Code, is exactly what he says, I believe. And you're right. Like, it's, you should actually strive to write your code that your variables are named in such a way that the code explains itself, and then your comment can explode why you actually doing it. If you find that you've actually gone and had to put a comment on every single line of code, you're most likely not naming your variables really well, or your logic is not the most sound. Okay, so let's get our star sheet back in. Okay, so it should go back to. Okay, so we got that back. So I've just got that just so that I know that everything's working. Right, so one of the things that always catch people out, and they never understand why, is that, let me just quickly cover this, is that each of the browsers have got their own way of understanding the rules of HTML and CSS. So let's take a step back there. Is that there's a set of rules made by the W3 consortium. I think Schalk's going to have to correct me if I've got the name wrong there. They basically write the spec for how HTML and CSS must work. So, for example, they say if the thing says display flex, then it must do this, this, and this, and this. Now, there's a problem here in that these companies all think they all know what's right. So they each do their own way of interpreting different rules. So Chrome has got its own way of doing something. Firefox has got its own way of doing something. Safari, which I can promise you now you're going to learn to really hate. Like, I fight with Safari every day of my life. They've got their own rules of doing something, and it can be a bit of a mess. So you will sometimes come across, I'm trying to remember what the name is called now. Sort of like it's a set of CSS rules for that particular browser. I'm not going to cover it now, but I just thought I'd mention it. So, for example, one is WebKit. There you can see it, yeah, WebKit local, right? So when your page loads, it's got a sort of default set of rules that have applied to it. Most of them are the same, but some are a little bit different. And one of the things that catch people out is there is an inherent margin on your page. So let's just go and say that we were to have a div here. It's going to just go and just call it page wrapper. Sorry. There's actually an extension you can get that will fill the class names in here, but I've tried to reduce the stuff I'm using. Let's just go back around. Okay, so let's see. Am I doing anything wrong here? Nope. Okay. So take a look here now. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit for you. You'll see that, like, I've zoomed in, so this is a bit more pronounced. You'll see that on the outside, there's actually this outside margin. That's like a built-in styling of the page. And it's, I think all browsers add this little bit of a margin. So the very first thing you're going to want to do when it comes to your body is you're going to want to reset this. And I'm just covering this because I know from previous experience at a course I used to help out at, that this used to catch people all the time. And I would see them positioning, like they would use absolute positioning and negative margins to move their containers and have the size 110%. And it's all it was basically this margin that's automatically applied to your page. And when you get to frameworks, you get resets that do this automatically for you. But what you also get if you're just doing like a basic HTML page is you get CSS resets. So let's just check if I can find you. I haven't used one in a long time. So I don't even know if these are valid anymore. Schalk, do you even use these CSS resets?
So the original one is by Eric Meyer. No, I don't. So that just strips all browser styling. Then there was a phase where people like really used one called Normalize, which instead of stripping everything, made sure that like there's all the browsers have like they fixed like the inconsistencies between browsers. Yeah, I don't really use those anymore.
Yeah.
Like the differences between browsers have become less pronounced than they were like a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Okay. So you'll still see people sometimes using this, and basically you import this, and what it will do is it will reset like that you won't have this margin. It automatically gets done for you. And there's a few other ones. I'm sure they've done their research to know why they've had to research certain things. Reset. Okay, so we've got our sort of just our margin sorted out here. Now let's actually got 15 minutes left, so let's just quickly go and work at just doing that sort of basics we had there for that Google page. So as I mentioned, we're gonna have a page wrapper here. I'm not going to follow like BEM or anything for today. Just going to have just basic classes. We had this page wrapper, which is this outside one. I know you can't really see it too well, so I'll just try and drag it out. It's this one that's on the outside. I'll make it have a different color for today. Let's just go with the red there. Okay, so we got this red one on the outside, and that's the first one we're going to do here. So let's just go with that, and then page wrapper. So we actually already set up with that. So that's the one that I wanted to do. Let's just see it, background red. So it's already there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do 3 containers. We're going to do, there's the header, there's the middle one, and then there's the footer. So let's just go and write our code in here. What I did there is just quickly, just for workflow purposes, if you hold Alt and you push down, actually wait, no. I've reset I use my own shortcut keys, so I might not have the correct one here.
I think it's Alt Control. Maybe.
Alt Control down. Let's see, I've removed mine. So I'm gonna have to just
Alt Shift. Sorry, I just tested it.
Okay, so if you push Alt Shift up or down, it will duplicate the line for you. I'm so sorry. I've set my own key bindings, and that is like probably going to be your favorite key. I can swear to you that, and then select line is going to be your 2 favorite keys. It's just so fast. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm copying line down, but copy line down is the same as duplicating a line. I actually cover this in the one my only YouTube video. Right. So then we've got a header. We're going to have our body over here. And then we're going to have our footer. Okay, so you can see that it's popped up over there. So for the class, for this, I'm just going to call this page header. These are not good class names, so do not copy the classes I'm giving you. It's just for demonstration purposes here. Page body, and then class is equal to page footer. Okay, so we'll go here and just write these out. You can just copy this. Paste it. That's not the right one. When it comes to naming variables, I always have a hard time. Yeah, look at just like I'm not lying to you. Like I could sit a whole week and struggle with trying to find the right name. And it's actually sort of arguably one of the most important parts of programming is naming your variables. So when it comes to classes, you find that you have to rename it to be more understandable and all of that. Like you're not doing anything wrong, you're actually doing the right thing by going and actually changing the name to be a better name. And if you read let me just get his book here. He's sort of known as Uncle Bob, probably the most popular name. It's Bob Martin, right? Bob, we just got Uncle Bob. I can't remember his full name. He's got, so there you are, Bob C. Martin. He's got this book here, Clean Code. This is sort of recognized as the book to have. And you'll see even in the first few pages, he says that there's many times that he's had to go weeks after weeks, had to go and rename his variables. So if that happens, it's not something bad that's happening. You're actually improving your app. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and I'm going to have a flex container that's going to go in a flex direction. So let's just go back to our Photoshop here. What I'm going to actually want is I want this outside container to be a flex container, and it positions things so that they're going downwards like that. Now, typically, the way that flex works is it goes across like this. So this is the row, but we actually want it in a column. So this is the direction that we actually want it to be. So let's just hop back to VS Code quickly. And in the wrapper, I actually like to have, and this is just my way of doing it, I prefer to have my flex containers at the top and then my sizing. So I'm going to go display flex. Now you can see they're actually wrapped next to each other like this. Let me zoom in. We've got the header, then we've got the body. So now they're basically, the containers are next to each other like this. Okay, we don't want that. We want it to be going downwards. So we're going to go flex direction and then go column. Right? And then just sort of like a little, remember I said that you can actually have your own emits. I've got my own one here. I think I just go DF, tab, display flex, and it just pops in. So it's great if you eventually start having your own little things like that to try and improve your own workflow. Okay. So because of flex, it's going, and also, and because they're just basically normal, just block containers, they're actually spanning the entire page, which is great. It's exactly what we want. Now we're actually almost done, to be honest. All we actually need is we need to get this body to grow. So let me actually see if any of you know, maybe some of you caught this the last time. Is there anything I could do to basically get this body to blow up so that we've got this nice big body, and then just the header and the footer. Any of you know what I can do here? Talita?
Yeah, so don't you just say, is it .page wrapper in your style, and then just specify, actually.
Okay, well, let me show you what you can do. So this is one of the biggest things like I used to struggle with, is that we've got this basic layout where you've got a header, you've got a big body, and you've got a footer. Now, how do you get that body to always push that footer down to the bottom? And you will, I swear, go look around the internet today and go spot it for yourself. You will see so many websites that if you drag the page down, the footer doesn't go all the way down to the bottom. It stops like over here. And you'll see them, they're actually going fake content in there to push it down. Now, there is a way that we can actually easily do that. Now, the way that I would usually try to do this is I would go with a height of 100%, and then that goes and pushes the footer like this down to the bottom. But sometimes this doesn't always work the way that you would like. And, missed that, sorry. Oh, yes. Okay, okay, I didn't even know that. Now, there's the really, really cool trick, and I love it. And basically, all you do is on your body, you go flex grow 1. And what this is going to do is got the same thing over here. So basically, you got, I think, as Schalk said, that's the holy grail. Now your body is always going to be pushed. It's pushing the footer down to the bottom. And that's basically all you basically need to emulate this design over here. We've got the header, we've got our sort of middle container, and then we've got our footer at the bottom. Where I would now go from here, I'm just going to try and just get rid of that one, is that I will start now breaking this down into further parts. I can immediately see that this is going to be a container, and that's actually not the best one. Let's do this one over here. So I would see that this is going to be a container over here, and it's fine if you don't immediately spot this. This will come with time. Then there could be something, a container over here. There will be a container that's got this input, probably an input for a container here with these buttons, and then a container like this. Now, they don't necessarily have to be containers, but this is how your page is breaking down. And if you can break down, like start teaching yourself to see the different layers like this, boarding out a page is incredibly, incredibly easy. There's one last thing that I just want to touch on in regards to boarding this page out, is pixel perfect design. It's something that I try to specialize in because a lot of people don't offer it. And I get into a lot of arguments with people about it. They don't think it should be a part of web development and web design, but I do like it. Basically, there's a school of thought where you can design things to be pixel perfect to the design you give a person. So there's an extension called Pixel Perfect. So let's just pop this open. I'm going to have to get everything back to a reasonable size and just hold on. And what this extension does is, okay, so here's something that I was showing. It allows you to go and import an image. Oh, here we go. Here's the Google from the other day. Okay, so I can actually go and import an image in this extension. So here's the image I've imported. It's this Google image, and I can position it. So I'm moving it left and right here. I've put it in the middle of the page. But so what I can do now is by having this overlay here, I can make it transparent, and I can build out my page to match this exactly the way that the designer's given it to me. Generally, your project manager will get really upset with you if you do this, because it means you're going to take a lot longer to build your page. They just want you to give an approximation. Like if they say there's spacing here, it's an approximate spacing. They don't expect you to make it 19 pixels. But I have had clients where they wanted to look exactly like that design, and this extension will help you do that. So let's just say I was going to build out this footer over here. Just very, very quickly. So let's like a height of what, 100 almost. So there we go. So you can see now that footer's base, it's almost there. It's not exactly. So 140 maybe. So now you can see that red. This is the red at the back here. And then there is the original page. Oh, sorry, the sort of the original design. So this is now allowing me to get an exact pixel perfect build of their page. So if someone ever does come to you and they wanted to look, or if you want to impress someone, like in a job interview, building a page out like this is gonna is definitely going to score a lot of brownie points because you can show them, say, look, this is your original, and tell me how this, like, spot the difference, you know, that little game that you get. But a lot of people don't think you should be designing things pixel perfect. It's going to eat up a lot of time. So usually it's just an approximation. They will just say, yeah, some spacing, just make an approximate size that there can be there. Right, everyone, we've got like 5 minutes left, so I think I'm just going to open it to any questions. Possibly even if you could give us some feedback for the session and what you would like. Like, this is just the first out of what is hopefully going to be many more in the future. We're still testing the waters, seeing the best way we can provide value for you. Like, we're not trying to create something for ourselves. We're trying to create something for you. And that means whatever you want to see or any way we can improve, please do let us know so that we can make it better.
I have 2 questions. The one is a more based on pixel perfect, and especially with like reactive design for different, like for when you're on the phone or different computers. And how does pixel perfect like interact with like the different displays?
You would have to, when you're boarding, it would depend on how many breakpoints they're going to give you. So for example, let's say Google gave me 2 breakpoints. They would give me this design, which is this one over here. Okay, I'll show you. I'll give you a brief here from. I'm allowed to do this. Look, I've spoken to them, so let me just grab. So this is better to explain it this way. So let's say they gave you this design, which is a desktop design, and then there is going to be the iPhone design. I would load the desktop one, and I would design it according to that desktop, and then I would design the mobile one according to. Then I would import a different one, and I would make my screen smaller to design the mobile. There is a problem though with this, is that in between those, the transition between that, you don't know what they want. But if you do the way that I show you, yeah, it will look exactly the same at those breakpoints.
Cool, yeah. And the last one is, one of the issues that Africa has, especially like the government sector and things like that, is using like Internet Explorer. And are there like really like modern workarounds for it, or is it just like get them off Internet Explorer?
No, look, I think this is going to differ from workplace to workplace. So I'll speak from my experience. We have to deal with Internet Explorer. Unfortunately, not. You have to sort of. I'll tell you speak from my experience is that eventually we got IE people complaining, and then we need to adjust according to IE because we don't include IE in our testing process because it's just going to slow everything down. Like we get an MVP, we need to get that page out in 3 days. We don't have time to, they're either going to choose, or you're going to have an MVP, or you're going to go and cater for everyone. So I think Schalk and Omar might have to go and chip in here, but from my experience, there isn't sort of like a tool or anything you can use. You just got to test on Internet Explorer and see if it works, and then also rely on people complaining about it. Schalk, I think you might have a bit more experience in this regard.
So generally, I try and encourage everyone that I work with to disregard Internet Explorer. Microsoft themselves, their official position is Internet Explorer is dead. Don't use Internet Explorer. It's not secure. It hasn't been getting security updates. That is ideologically where I stand. Practically, things are a bit more complex because, if the majority of users are on Internet Explorer, like, as you said, the governmental sector and so forth, then you can't necessarily take a theoretical and ideological stance. You need to kind of say, listen, either they're going to use it or they're not going to use it. And also, sometimes it's out of the control. So where this happens the most, and which is why you see this in government and big bureaucracies, is when IT departments are using tools that only work on Internet Explorer and they haven't updated it in decades. So they force everyone to use Internet Explorer. So my first reaction would be possibly a word that I can't say here, directed at those IT departments. But, if you have no control over that, and that's just the reality, then So your best friends are going to be auto prefixing. So there's a tool called Auto Prefixer. That's going to add all those vendor prefixes that Martin spoke about. The / the dash WebKit, all of those things. Another thing is going to be Transpilation. So with your JavaScript, my guess is you probably don't want to write JavaScript that still uses vars and ES5 and so forth. You want to use consts and all of the nice things we have today in JavaScript. So you're probably going to want to use something like Parcel, which just transpiles your code to an older version of JavaScript. Most solutions are build tools. The other thing is polyfills. So you might want to polyfill things. A big one is Fetch. Which there's a well-known Fetch polyfill. I don't do any polyfilling nowadays, but if you need to support really old browsers. So polyfilling, the difference between Transpilation and polyfilling is Transpilation takes code and it rewrites it in an older version of that code. Polyfilling adds functionality to the code that it didn't previously had. So for example, you get things like just quality of life things that you can type out with like one method or whatever in JavaScript nowadays that took like 20 lines of code and so forth. That's essentially what Transpilation does. Polyfilling is actually adding that object to the actual JavaScript environment that is natively included previously by whatever means. And those three kind of things are kind of your friends. Otherwise, as Martin said, you just need to test, and I think it's useful to know that up front. It's very hard to go back and make something IE friendly if you haven't taken that into consideration. So I think by far the most helpful thing is to know when that's going to be a requirement. And that's a conversation I would have with clients. I would tell them up front, like, listen, IE is dead. Microsoft themselves says don't use IE. It's bad. Do you want to support IE? Let's have a discussion around that. And let's have a discussion around like what that's going to do in terms of the scope of the project, the budget, and so forth. That's a conversation I would have regardless up front. And more often than not, the clients are going to say like no. Sometimes they're going to say no, it's critical. And if that's the case, then you just explain. Naturally, that's going to increase testing. It's going to increase time spent on the project. It's going to mean that for what they pay for, they're going to get less. So you kind of make them do the trade-off. You kind of just give them what they need. But this is a conversation I would have up front because it gets more and more expensive to provide for IE the further down you get into the project. I guess that's
cool.
my general take.
No, that's perfect, because I used to work support in an environment where we had a site and then we had all the ActiveX issues with IE and that kind of stuff. And I've been in development for the past 3-4-ish years. And it's not something I've run into again. But if I want to go back and help those people I used to work with, it's just something cool to keep in mind. So I start off with the right foot and writing something for them.
Yeah, I wouldn't go into it trying to do that because it is. For example, you are not going to be. If you use auto prefixer, you'll be able to use Flexbox in IE 11, but it's also a very weird prefixed version of Flexbox. That's not the same as kind of the one we use nowadays. And the further down you go, I think once you get to IE 8. You don't even have media queries, so at some point you are really holding back your product. And to me, making your code more complex to get wider support isn't a good trade-off. Like that, you can do that within reason, but having to add all this extra complexity just to support 0.01% of users, to me, is not a good trade-off. Yeah. Cool.
Anything else?
Yeah, on that note, I actually need to head out.
Okay.
But hopefully I'll see you guys again next week.
Right, Schalk. Thanks for joining us, man. Much appreciated.
Cool. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Bye.
Cheers, man.
Right. So I think we're going to be ending off unless anybody else has got any questions. Tamira's asked that if we can cover flex and display block, display and block and all of that. So I think maybe next session that might be the focus if everybody's interested in that.
Yeah, that sounds good, I think.
Okay.
That's good.
Nice. Thanks, guys.
Right. Okay, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm sorry if I covered stuff like I believe that you were all here the other day, so it probably did cover things that you really did know. But it's just so that we can start again from ground zero. And I'm sure that like with Schalk joining in, I promise you, there's going to be a lot to be learning. And thank you very much for actually attending, and I hope it's been helpful to you.
Yeah, thanks very much for everything, mate.
Cool, man.
Thank you. Yeah.
Have a good week.
Helpful. Thank you.
Bye.
Right. Cheers, guys. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Cheers, man.
Bye.
Bye.